The dragon princess Lysara lay in her enormous bed, her golden scales dull and lifeless. The usual shimmer of her wings had faded, and even her fire, the pride of her kind, sputtered weakly whenever she tried to breathe it out. The great halls of the Cloud City were filled with whispers. Every dragon in the royal court feared the worst. Many had never seen their princess so fragile. Doctors from distant worlds had been summoned. They carried strange tools, machines that scanned every cell, and devices that could read energy flows. Yet none of them could explain why Lysara was failing. They tried potions, injections, even the rarest crystals from the far reaches of the galaxy, but nothing worked. The princess grew weaker and the court grew more restless. Among all this worry, Kale, a small human servant, moved quietly through the castle. Humans were rare in the dragon city, and most dragons considered them weak and slow. They did not notice him much, which suited Kale perfectly. He had no interest in titles or rewards. All he cared about was observing, learning, and helping in small ways. Kale had been assigned to the princess's chambers weeks ago. At first he had felt out of place. He was small, with no scales, no wings, and certainly no fire. But he quickly noticed something the dragons did not: Lysara's strange habits. She did not want to eat the meals prepared by the royal chefs. She sometimes muttered words that no one could understand. And often she would stare at the floor for minutes, as if she were listening to something invisible. One quiet evening, Kale lingered near her door, pretending to polish a table. He noticed her wings twitch slightly, a sign of discomfort. Something about her movements was odd. It was not just weakness, there was something unseen causing it. Kale frowned, thinking carefully. The great dragon doctors used machines and magic, but perhaps they were missing what a human's eyes and mind could see. The next day, while the court doctors argued over charts and glowing screens, Kale watched from the corner. He noticed tiny flecks of light under the edge of the princess's bed. They were faint, like sparks of fire, but very small and quiet. When he tried to point them out, the dragons brushed him off. A human sees too much, or perhaps too little, one doctor laughed. Kale said nothing. He knew sometimes silence was stronger than words. As days passed, Kale continued his careful observation. He learned her schedule, the times she felt worst, the nights she could barely sleep. One night, Lysara sighed and tried to whisper something. Kale leaned in, trying to catch the words. Beneath, she muttered. The humans in the room had never heard her speak clearly before. Kale's heart raced. Beneath? Beneath what? That night, when everyone else had left, Kale returned to her chambers. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the city lights outside. He approached the bed carefully, his hands trembling slightly. Beneath the heavy frame, the tiny sparks of light flickered again. Kale crawled closer. He could see them now clearly, tiny machines no bigger than pebbles, glowing with a soft blue light. They pulsed in rhythm with Lysara's heartbeat. Kale's mind raced. These machines were not part of any dragon magic or doctor's tool. They were alien, ancient, and clearly dangerous. They were draining her strength, feeding on her energy without anyone knowing. If the doctors continued their treatments without noticing them, Lysara could become weaker with each passing day. For a moment, Kale hesitated. He was just a human, small and fragile compared to the dragons and their technology. But he knew something the dragons did not. Careful observation and courage could solve problems even the greatest intellects could not. He took a deep breath and touched one of the tiny machines. It was warm and thrummed slightly, almost alive. Kale's hands did not shake now. He knew he had to act, but first he needed to understand. He sat on the floor beside the bed, studying the machines. They were delicate, but Kale realized that with care they could be removed. He had no tool designed for this, but humans were good at making do with what they had. The problem was clear, and the solution would need patience, precision, and bravery. Kale smiled faintly to himself. For once, being human, small, underestimated, and unnoticed, was an advantage. Outside the chamber, the city slept, unaware that the fate of a dragon princess rested in the hands of a human. Kale knew this night would change everything, not just for Lysara but for humans like him. Sometimes, the smallest among them could do what the greatest dragons could not. Kale whispered softly to the princess, "I will help you. I promise." And for the first time in many nights, Lysara's breathing eased. Kale did not sleep that night. He stayed by the princess's bed, studying the tiny machines beneath it. Each one glowed softly, pulsing like a small heart. He touched them carefully with the tip of his finger. They were warm and fragile. One wrong move and they might hurt Lysara. Kale realized the doctors had no idea these machines even existed. They had scanned her body, her energy, her blood, but they had never looked beneath her bed. The next morning, Kale observed Lysara closely as she moved about her room. She was still weak, but her eyes flickered with curiosity, almost as if she knew something was happening. Kale noticed her glancing toward the floor several times, whispering under her breath. The words were unclear, but one sounded like beneath. He nodded quietly to himself. He was not imagining it. The princess wanted help, but the others were blind to what was really happening. Kale began to watch the patterns of the machines. They moved slightly like tiny living things. They seemed to respond to Lysara's heartbeat, drawing power from her life force. The glow grew stronger whenever she tried to lift herself, and dimmed when she rested. Kale realized that they were smart, perhaps programmed long ago by some alien race. The doctor's tools would never detect this subtle energy. Only careful observation, patience, and human curiosity could solve this mystery. He spent the day thinking. He could not just pull the machines out recklessly. That might harm Lysara. He needed a plan. Kale began collecting small items from the room: a thin metal rod from a decorative stand, a magnifying glass from the study, and a small jar to safely hold the devices. He studied the glow carefully, noting how each pulse matched her breathing. The smallest mistake could endanger the princess, but Kale felt a strange thrill. This was the kind of challenge humans excel at: improvising, taking risks, and thinking in ways others would not. Later that afternoon, Kale returned to the machines beneath the bed. He whispered to himself, "I will find a way. I just need to understand them first." He leaned closer and noticed something no one else would see. The devices were linked together by almost invisible threads of energy. They formed a network, all feeding off Lysara in perfect synchronization. This explained why the doctor's tests showed nothing. They were looking at her body, not at the hidden system beneath the bed. Kale knew he had to observe the machines at night. During the day their glow was faint, but at night they pulsed stronger. He decided to hide in the room after the court left, waiting for the moment when the machines were most active. That night, he crouched in the shadows, heart beating fast. The tiny lights pulsed brighter than ever. He could almost feel the princess's life being drained, each pulse taking a little of her strength. Kale shivered but did not move. This was his chance to study them closely. Hours passed. Kale noticed a pattern. The machines moved slightly in response to her voice, responding to sounds and whispers. Lysara sometimes murmured names or small words, and the devices would quiver. Kale realized that if he could distract them or trick them, he might be able to remove them without harming the princess. He made a careful plan in his mind. He would need to be precise, quiet, and fast. Human hands were small and flexible. Human minds could adapt in ways no dragon or machine could predict. As dawn approached, Kale felt exhausted but determined. He knelt beside the bed, studying each machine one last time. They were small but powerful in their effect. He whispered softly to Lysara, "I understand now. I know why no one else could help you. But I can." He did not tell her about the danger because fear could weaken her. She looked at him with tired eyes, yet there was a spark of trust. She had no words, but Kale felt her hope. By the third night, Kale's careful study had paid off. He had mapped every machine, memorized their positions, and understood their connection to the princess's life force. He had fashioned tiny tools from simple items around the room. Humans could improvise, dragons could not. The doctors had the knowledge, but Kale had observation, creativity, and courage. That was enough. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow I will try. I will save her." Kale's confidence grew. He had learned to read the machines like a book. Each pulse told a story. Each flicker gave a clue. And the greatest lesson came quietly to him. Humans could succeed where others failed, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they could see differently, think differently, and act when others hesitated. The princess slept fitfully, unaware of the careful human watching her every move. Kale stayed awake, silent and vigilant. He imagined the moment when the last machine would be removed, when her fire would return, when her scales would shine again. The thought gave him strength. By the fourth night, Kale felt ready. He had studied every detail, planned every move, and prepared every tool. He knew he had only one chance. The smallest mistake could hurt Lysara, but the smallest success could save her life. He whispered one last promise, "I will not fail you." And in the quiet room, the tiny machines pulsed, unaware that a human mind had finally understood them. Outside, the wind swept across the floating city, and the first rays of sunlight touched the clouds. Inside, Kale waited beneath the shadows of the bed, ready to take the next step, the step that no doctor, no dragon, and no machine had thought possible. That night, Kale stayed in his usual shadowy corner, waiting for the court to leave and the princess to fall asleep. The castle was quiet, the hum of the city below faint and distant. Lysara lay in her bed, breathing softly, her weak wings folded around her. The tiny machines beneath her bed pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Kale's eyes followed each flicker. He could feel the danger in the air, but he had prepared for this moment for days. Carefully, Kale crawled closer, keeping his movements slow so as not to wake the princess. His small human hands moved with precision. Each machine glowed softly, and he noticed that one of them seemed slightly brighter than the others. It was the largest, and he guessed it might be the source of the other's power. He whispered to himself, "This is it. I have to be careful." Kale reached beneath the bed. The first machine was smooth, warm, and surprisingly light. He held it gently, studying it. It pulsed with Lysara's heartbeat, synchronized with her breathing. One wrong move, and it could drain too much energy or even hurt her. Kale's heart pounded. He had never handled alien devices like this before, but humans had a skill dragons did not. They could improvise, think fast, and act calmly under pressure. He removed the first machine carefully and placed it into the small jar he had prepared. The glow dimmed immediately. Kale noticed a slight change in the princess. Her breathing was steadier, and her wings twitched less uncomfortably. Encouraged, he moved to the next one. Each machine was slightly different in shape and glow. Some were round, some triangular, but all pulsed with the same rhythm. As Kale worked, he noticed that the machines reacted to sound. When he accidentally tapped the bedpost, one flickered rapidly, sending a small shock through his fingers. He yelped softly but did not let go. He realized he needed to be extremely quiet and precise. Kale adjusted his position, moving slowly like water flowing around rocks. He whispered to himself, "Humans are clever. I can do this." Time passed slowly. Each machine removed made the others weaker. Kale realized they were connected in a network, feeding off each other to drain Lysara's strength. It was like a puzzle, and humans were good at puzzles. He remembered all the nights he had observed their patterns, memorized their pulses, and learned their responses. His patience was paying off. Finally, only the largest machine remained. It glowed brighter than ever, pulsating violently when he moved his hand near it. Kale's fingers shook, but he steadied them. He took a deep breath. He had learned how to handle the smaller ones, and now he had to use the same skill on the largest. He touched it gently, feeling the warmth and the subtle vibration. His mind raced. If he removed it too quickly, the energy stored inside could harm the princess. Kale thought quickly. He remembered a trick humans used in old stories. Sometimes, to remove something dangerous, you distract it first. He hummed softly, a small, steady sound. The machine's pulses synchronized with the hum. Slowly, gently, he lifted it from the floor. It resisted at first, but Kale's hands were steady. Slowly, he guided it into the jar. The glow dimmed completely, and the room fell into a calm silence. Kale exhaled. He had done it. All the machines were removed. The princess's chest rose and fell more evenly. Her wings twitched slightly as if she were stretching after a long sleep. Kale's heart swelled with relief. He had succeeded where the greatest dragon doctors had failed. Not because he was stronger or more learned, but because he observed, adapted, and acted. For a moment he just watched her sleep. Lysara's pale glow returned to her scales, her fire deepened in her throat, and a faint shimmer appeared in her wings. Kale realized that humans, though small and underestimated, could solve problems that others could not. Courage, patience, and clever thinking, these were human strengths. And tonight they had saved a dragon princess. Kale carefully closed the jar and hid it under the bed. He did not want the machines falling into the wrong hands. The princess stirred slightly but did not wake. He smiled softly. "You are safe now," he whispered. "No doctor could do what I did, but humans can. You will live." The castle outside was quiet, the wind sweeping over the clouds. For centuries, dragons had ruled, proud and unchallenged. But tonight, a single human had proven that even the smallest among them could make a difference. Kale felt a warmth in his chest, not from fire or magic, but from the knowledge that courage and cleverness could outshine power and tradition. As dawn approached, he crept out of the room, leaving the princess to rest. His mind was already planning the next steps. He would have to explain to the court, to the doctors, that humans were not weak or insignificant. That sometimes, a single human could save what even the strongest could not. He walked quietly through the halls, small steps that carried great significance. Kale had looked beneath the bed and he had discovered the truth. And in doing so he had changed everything. The next morning the royal court gathered in the great hall, murmuring anxiously. Princess Lysara's room had been empty all night, and the court doctors were nervous. They had spent days trying every spell, every machine, every potion, and still the princess had grown weaker. Some whispered that perhaps she was beyond saving. Kale entered quietly, holding the jar with the tiny machines hidden inside. No one paid him much attention. Humans were rarely considered important in the dragon court. They were small, slow, and fragile. Most dragons thought of them as little more than servants. But Kale did not care about what the dragons thought. All that mattered was the princess. He entered Lysara's room, kneeling beside her bed. The princess stirred, lifting her head weakly. Her golden scales had started to shine faintly, and her eyes, though tired, held a spark of recognition. Kale whispered, "Princess, it is time." He opened the jar and removed the last of the machines. Carefully he examined each one, checking that none of them were damaged. The dragons outside could hear a faint hum from the room. It was unlike anything their magic or machines had produced. Kale set the devices down and placed his hands gently on Lysara's shoulders. He felt the warmth of her body, the slow rhythm of her heartbeat. Then he began a simple human technique he had learned long ago, a careful, steady pressure to align the energy that the machines had disturbed. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Kale's hands were small but precise. He could feel the resistance in her energy, the remnants of the machine's drain. Slowly, the warmth returned to her scales. Her wings began to twitch with life, stretching slightly after days of weakness. Kale's heart lifted. He had seen this before. Sometimes patience and observation could accomplish what strength alone could not. The court doctors arrived, finally curious about the strange hum. They peered into the room and gasped. Lysara's chest rose and fell evenly, her scales catching the morning light in a golden shimmer. Her eyes opened fully, clear and bright. The room filled with a faint glow as her fire returned, small at first, then stronger with each breath. Kale stepped back, letting the princess rest. He had done his work quietly without fanfare. Yet the dragons noticed immediately. They could not understand how a human, small and weak in appearance, had restored the princess when their greatest knowledge had failed. Murmurs spread across the hall. Some dragons looked at Kale with suspicion, others with disbelief. Princess Lysara sat up, blinking against the light. Her voice was weak but clear. "Kale," she said, her eyes meeting his. The princess's gaze held gratitude, respect, and something deeper, a recognition that humans were not just servants. Kale smiled faintly, bowing his head. He had done what he had to do. Words were unnecessary. One of the chief doctors stepped forward, hesitant and embarrassed. I do not understand. How did you?" He stopped, unable to finish. Kale ignored him. The truth was simple. Humans had a gift the dragons often overlooked. They could observe, adapt, and act where others hesitated. They could see the invisible, notice the small, and solve problems through cleverness, patience, and courage. Kale knelt beside Lysara, and she placed a small, clawed hand on his shoulder. "You saved me," she said softly. Her scales shimmered with renewed life, and her wings stretched fully. No one else could. The other dragons were silent. The court doctors looked on, unable to hide their shock. Kale's small human form had accomplished what centuries of dragon knowledge and alien technology had failed to do. It was a lesson the court would not forget. Strength and magic were not the only paths to power. Sometimes, observation, intelligence, and bravery mattered more. The princess stood slowly, her wings catching the light in a magnificent display. She turned to the court and spoke, her voice strong now. "Humans are not weak. They are clever, courageous, and capable. Kale has shown us what we overlooked." The hall erupted in quiet murmurs. Some dragons bowed slightly, acknowledging the human in their midst. Others looked skeptical, but even they could not deny the change in the princess. Her health, her fire, her energy, all had returned. The tiniest among them had outshone the greatest. Kale stepped back, letting her move freely. He felt a quiet pride in his chest. Humans were often underestimated, but they had qualities that dragons could not match. Curiosity, ingenuity, courage, these were human strengths. And tonight they had saved a life. Princess Lysara approached Kale and extended a clawed hand. "You will always have a place here, Kale," she said. "Not as a servant but as a friend and as a hero." Kale bowed, his small human form trembling slightly. "Thank you, Princess," he said simply. "I only did what needed to be done." And in that moment the court realized something important. Humans were not weak. They were different, yes, but in their differences lay extraordinary power. They could succeed where dragons, doctors, and machines failed. And sometimes, a single human acting with courage and intelligence could change the fate of a kingdom. Kale looked at Lysara, her golden scales shining brilliantly in the morning sun. He smiled to himself. He had saved a princess, but more than that, he had shown the dragons the value of humans. The smallest among them could make the greatest difference. The great hall of the floating castle was filled with dragons, their scales glittering in the morning light. Word had spread quickly, Princess Lysara had recovered. Every dragon wanted to see her, but more importantly they wanted to know how. Rumors ran through the hall like wildfire. Some whispered about Kale, the small human servant who had been quietly watching in the shadows. Others thought it impossible that one human could succeed where centuries of dragon knowledge had failed. Kale stood at the back of the hall, small and unnoticed as always. He had expected nothing. He had acted not for reward, but because he could not watch the princess suffer. Yet now all eyes were turning toward him. The dragon's whispers grew louder. Some curious, some doubtful, and some filled with a grudging respect. Princess Lysara entered the hall, her golden scales shining brilliantly. Her wings stretched fully behind her, a display of strength and beauty that reminded everyone why she was the princess. She moved with grace, yet her eyes searched the crowd until they found Kale. For a moment the hall fell silent. Every dragon felt the weight of the moment. She raised her claw and spoke, her voice clear and commanding. Today we celebrate more than my recovery. Today we honor someone who has shown courage, intelligence, and determination, qualities that are often overlooked in humans. Kale stepped forward. All eyes turned to Kale. He hesitated, unsure if he should. But the princess's gaze was steady, full of trust and respect. Slowly he stepped forward, feeling the weight of hundreds of curious eyes on his small human shoulders. The whispers quieted as he approached the princess. Kale, Lysara continued, no doctor, no dragon, and no machine could find the cause of my weakness. But you, a human, saw what others ignored. You observed, you understood, and you acted. You saved my life. Kale felt warmth rise in his chest. For the first time in the Dragon City he was not invisible. He was not a servant or a small, weak human. He was someone who had made a real difference. He bowed his head respectfully. Princess, I only did what I could. I could not leave you in danger. The court erupted in quiet murmurs again. Some dragons seemed embarrassed by their own assumptions. Others were thoughtful, realizing that perhaps humans were more than they had ever believed. One of the senior doctors, usually proud and aloof, stepped forward. His voice was soft but full of meaning. We were blind. Kale, you have taught us something important. That humans, small and underestimated, can achieve what even the greatest minds cannot. We owe you respect. Kale nodded. He had expected no praise, but he accepted it quietly. The princess's presence had made all the difference. She had given him recognition, and that recognition would ripple through the court. For the first time, humans would not be seen as merely small creatures to serve dragons. They would be seen as capable, intelligent, and courageous. Lysara turned toward the court and spread her wings. Let this be a lesson, she said. Strength is not only in size, in scales, or in fire. Intelligence, courage, patience, and creativity are strength too. Humans possess these qualities in abundance. Kale has shown us that we must never underestimate them. The hall fell silent. Slowly, one by one, dragons began to bow, acknowledging Kale. Some dragons still looked skeptical, but the seeds of respect had been planted. Kale felt a strange pride. It was not the power of scales or fire that had mattered. It was the human mind, clever and courageous, acting where others hesitated. The princess approached Kale again, smiling. You will have a place here always, she said. Not as a servant but as a trusted advisor and friend. Your courage has earned it. Your intelligence has proven it. She reached out, letting her clawed hand rest lightly on his shoulder. The dragons of this city and I myself will remember this day forever. Kale looked around at the dragons in the hall. Many still stared in disbelief, but others looked at him with newfound respect. Humans had often been underestimated, ignored, or thought weak. Yet here he stood, small in body but mighty in impact. He realized something important. Humans did not need to be the strongest or the largest. They could succeed through observation, courage, and clever thinking. As the sun rose higher, its golden light spilling across the cloud city, Kale felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The princess was safe, the court had learned a lesson, and humans had earned recognition. For centuries, dragons had ruled with pride and power, but tonight, a single human had changed the way they saw the world. The floating city seemed brighter, almost alive, as if acknowledging the courage of one small human. Kale knew that his life had changed forever. Humans would no longer be overlooked, and perhaps the next time a problem seemed impossible, dragons would remember the lesson of the tiny human who had saved a princess. Kale smiled to himself, feeling the truth of it in his chest. Being human was enough. Being clever, brave, and willing to act. These were qualities no dragon or machine could surpass. And sometimes, those qualities could change the fate of an entire kingdom. And so, the small human servant became a hero among dragons. He had looked beneath the bed, discovered the hidden truth, and shown the world the power of human ingenuity. From that day forward, humans were no longer servants alone. They were partners, thinkers, and saviors.